I want to give a massive shout out to two outlets here. One of them is David Sirota's The Lever, and the other one is Jordan Chariton's Status Quo. These are the only two outlets doing phenomenal reporting, and in the case of Jordan, on-the-ground reporting when it comes to the train derailment in East Palestine, Texas, which then led to a giant, poisonous, toxic chemical fire, which is now, in turn, destroying the environment and the health of people in the region. So I want to give you an update on everything that's happening on the ground. Again, credit to Jordan for giving us all these videos and all this information. But what I can say for sure is this. You are being lied to by the EPA. You are being lied to by the government, by Joe Biden, by Pete Buttigieg, and more importantly, by the media, who are only covering this around the edges and not really getting on-the-ground facts and digging into the story. They are doing a status quo protection racket by just going with the line of the company and trying to downplay the fears. And we need real journalists like this. So definitely go support Status Quo and go support The Lever. So first I want to show you this. One of the claims by the EPA is, hey, Doug, look, we're doing testing and stuff, and the testing is coming back like everything's great. So I don't even know why you guys are upset or anything, bro. You know what I'm saying? Well, there's some evidence on the ground to the contrary. Watch.
So we are currently just downstream of the kind of aeration and a little mini dam that the kind of Norfolk Southern cleaners have set up. And there's still quite a bit of chemicals in the water below the dam area. I'm going to do this. This is, again, below where they're supposedly, like, aerating or filtering the water. Ready, John? Yep. And you can see all sorts of chemicals coming around.
Look at that.
All against shore here on both sides. And this is below the area that has been cleaned by the filters and aerators. I don't know what the point is. You're good.
And the smell, I mean, the smell's really bad.
Oh, yeah.
So they say, the authorities say, oh, that was already cleaned. We're good. That water's perfectly fine. They say it smells bad, and you can see the chemicals. You can see them. Did you know the EPA sent in germ cleaning crews after this happened? There massive outcry, massive public pressure, and they go, it's okay, we're going to send cleaners. They sent germ cleaners. Germ cleaners have nothing to do with these chemicals, with these toxic chemicals. It's all theater. It's all optics management. That's what they're doing. I got more for you. So here's Jordan talking to somebody who lives in the region 15 miles away, and listen to what she says.
I said, come out here and smell the air. I said, because I think it smells funny. I could smell a burning smell. He took a big breath in. He said, yeah, I smell something out there. He said it smelled like burning electronics. And then this proceeded 2, maybe 3 more times throughout the night. I would go out, experience the symptoms, come back in, and they would dissipate. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, because it wasn't sticking. Once I went back in the house, like the symptoms would just dissipate. And at that point, I had my tongue just was fried. By the time I woke up the next morning, it felt like I had been scalded, because as I talked to you in our communication prior to right now, I did experience the gastrointestinal bleeding, which I believe was because of the coffee that was oddly bitter. I think whatever was in the air got into the coffee.
So that was 15 miles away.
Yeah.
She went to her doctor. If you could put up the statement, Colin. Her doctor, looked at her and said that my doctor said I have signs of chemical exposure in my mouth, throat, ears, and nose. He declined blood work as they do not have tests to identify chemicals in the bloodstream. He advised me to come in monthly for a chest x-ray to be proactive should anything begin to form. Other than that, he said there is so little information coming out from authorities that the medical people aren't sure how to proceed. I have faith in him, and he said he would let me know if any of his other patients begin to develop additional symptoms. He said there have been a ton of people from our area coming into his office with the same symptoms I have had.
Now, again, the authorities are out there saying, I don't, everything's fine. Nobody's sick. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. We knew immediately after the crash there was a serious issue. Why? You could see piles of dead fish floating to the top in various bodies of water. Certainly poisonous to the fish. Then you had the guy who has foxes, and one of his foxes immediately started throwing up all over the place and ended up dying. And then the other one had a bunch of health issues, then later on ended up dying. You have somebody with a cat who had giant liver issues after this happened, and then they did, a surgery, and the cat ended up dying anyway, and now the poor woman stuck with like a $9,000 bill. You have wildlife all over the place being severely affected, and you have these human beings who are sick. Now, you're not seeing many reports, if any, in the media over this. You're only getting it from independent and new media. And by the way, they're brave enough to go to the scene. The scene where you have the toxic smell in the air, and people are getting sick, and they're brave enough to go there to get the story and tell the story of these people. At the exact same time that the government and top officials are lying and lying repeatedly. More on that in a second. So I want to give you some more. Here's another person, lives in the region, and they're going to tell you what they experienced.
Could you speak a little bit about the town hall last night and your experience there as well?
I felt very angry after I left. I felt like that was kind of what I was expecting them to do. They just gave us...
Let me just say that at this town hall, you had Norfolk Southern was like, we don't even want to send anybody there, bro. We're not going to send anybody there. Remember, originally they offered money, and it was like $5 a person. That's originally what they offered. Now, I think they upped that to like $1,000 a person or something. But the rot goes very, very deep, as you're about to see.
A lot of runaround, vague answers that kind of dodged your questions, and they just used as many words as they could. Like, they weren't really saying anything while they were saying it, and there was a lot of long-winded I don't knows. There was a lot of... I actually stayed over at the end of it for about an hour trying to talk to as many EPA, whoever I could before they moved their stuff out. And I was asking questions to Ohio EPA, and he directed me to the U.S. EPA. I went to him. He said, the Ohio EPA guys who you want to talk to. And neither one of them had the answer. Nobody could answer the real, actual questions. A lot of residents had a pretty strong voice. There are women. There's a woman who lives real close to me. Her house was condemned. They said that her air tested okay first, and then they went back. She demanded more testing because she's by the contaminated creek, just like I am. And they condemned her house. They're paying for her to move out, all her moving costs. And they're still telling people at this town hall meeting that they're not finding levels in people's home. And that's just not true. And she's not the only one either.
Well, how can they, how can they say that when it's like the way you're describing it, it's like most people are showing these various symptoms, be it like a sore throat or a headache, and you're talking about these rashes that a lot of people have, especially children.
We're really concerned. It's scary. Yeah,
it is
so
scary.
we're asking that. We're asking, why are we getting sick? And we couldn't get an answer.
Oh.
Yeah, so one of the things the EPA is saying is that the homes that they are testing, that the air contamination is fine. They've actually said this about several of the homes, which I doubt is the case.
So the readings they're showing us that they are, but our houses smell like formaldehyde. They smell like overwhelming chemical smell. People are still getting sick. It doesn't add up. Like, either the numbers you're getting need to be lowered or you're lying.
Right.
Like, people are sick. Answer why. We didn't all just develop the same problems just coincidentally when CDC data shows these are the symptoms from this exposure. It's bullshit. They're lying to our faces.
So they deny any health problems. They deny it. They deny anybody's having any health problems at all. And then when people are like, literally, I have them, then the goalpost moves and they say, yeah, but if there's any exposure, there's any issues related to any exposure, it's just temporary. It's just, it's in and out. It's in and out of the system. You're fine. You got a sore throat and a headache and whatever other issues, but it's going to clear up. Everything's going to be fine. No worries whatsoever. Well, why don't we go to an actual expert on the topic and see what they have to say? More from Jordan here.
I'm hearing from a lot of residents, their home smells like gas. One said formaldehyde, some really toxic stuff. Yet the testing is, according to them, showing up no vinyl chloride or, any quantities outside whatever they consider the normal range. Then what is it folks are smelling, and can that be dangerous even if it's not coming up in what the EPA considers troubling ranges?
Yeah, thanks. I would answer that a couple ways. First of all, if you can smell it, it's already at levels that are concerning. So our detection levels for smelling it are already exceeding, OSHA worker lifetime exposure levels. So already that's a concern. There are exposure levels below what we can smell it at that I would still be concerned about. So that's one thing to know.
Do you understand what she just said? If it's at the point where you can smell the chemicals, then it is definitely in a range that is not at all safe. But she goes on to say, there are even levels where you can't smell it, where it would be a serious, serious health concern. Astonishing. Nobody's getting this information. Only the people who follow the lever and status quo are getting this information. Man, this is getting worse.
The second way I'd answer that is, while there is a sense of, higher doses are worse for you, for sure there's a dose response relationship. Even at low doses, and even short term or short duration doses are still harmful. And that's because these chemicals are inherently hazardous. Like vinyl chloride causes cancer. That's an inherent property of the chemical, and it's not going to change. So less exposure to a carcinogen is less, poses less of a risk than more exposure, but all of it is a risk. There's never a no risk phase when you're talking about exposure to hazardous chemicals, in particular, because one has to consider vulnerable populations like pregnant women, like children, like elders, like people with other diseases or medical concerns. And also, when you consider the cumulative exposures along with other chemical exposures and stresses that people are experiencing, those compound.
Inherently hazardous and carcinogenic. Let me repeat that. Inherently hazardous and carcinogenic. Now, look, the government could make an argument. They could come out and say, you know what? Look, we're gonna be honest with you guys. We're gonna lay out all the facts. We're gonna tell you the truth as we know it. And the fact of the matter is, even though this is a serious issue, even though some of you are seeing symptoms now, you would need to be exposed to this hazardous chemical for X amount of time, persistently. You'd have to smell it for over 7 months on end in order for it to lead to these sorts of health problems. And look, I hope that's the case, right? Like, I hope that it's not as bad as it appears to be based on the actual information on the ground. But we don't know. We don't know. And the biggest problem here is the crisis of trust in our institutions, not brought about because, the people are dumb and stupid and ridiculous and they're not smart enough. No, brought about because of the abject failure of these institutions that are supposed to protect us. So keep in mind, every single thing that you just saw right there, all of this information that you've now been exposed to, and how are the authorities reacting? Oh, you guys are going to love this. The Ohio EPA, enjoying a glass of water in East Palestine. And then they list all the people who are in this picture here, all the, the politicians and the health officials and everything, and the fire chief. And they say they're happy to see good data results that show the water in the village is safe to drink. And here they are right here, drinking the water, trying to quell fears, trying to calm everybody down. It's okay. There's no problems. Don't worry about it. It's all good. This is exactly what happened at Chernobyl when there was a nuclear catastrophe. They sent in workers in the initial wave to try to fix it who weren't even wearing protective gear. And then they all ended up dying. We saw a similar thing happen on 9/11. People were breathing in that toxic dust from the buildings collapsing, and they didn't think anything of it. They were heroes. They were courageous. They were trying to save people. Then years and years later, turns out it manifested, and people had emphysema, and people had cancer, and they couldn't breathe. And, of course, by the way, the government tried to weasel out of paying for their health care. But every step of the way, the institutions are lying to us. So the crisis in trust in our institutions, you could put right at the doorstep of the institution themselves. And then you wonder, something like COVID happens, and you got a super high percentage of the population that it doesn't buy the narrative or doesn't buy the advice that's given by the government as to how you should deal with it, because they've thoroughly discredited themselves. And instead of the institutions getting their act together and telling people the truth and actually tackling this like a real problem, instead of doing crisis management, optics management, they just point the finger at everybody and say, you're wrong, you're dumb, you're lying, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, and the media is nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. They're not telling you the truth. The fact of the matter is, anybody who's downwind of that toxic fire, you need to get out. Anybody who's in the area where the water is contaminated, you need to get out. Now, that's my assessment based on the actual information that mainstream media is not reporting in detail. Information that the EPA and the health officials are not discussing at all. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're saying, don't worry, don't panic, everything's okay, everything's fine. And they're doing this. Similar thing that like Obama did in Flint, Michigan when he drank the water and said, oh yeah, I love the water from Flint, Michigan. When we knew there were still issues with it. This is a crisis of trust in our institutions because of our institutions failing us. And a lot of this has to do with corporate capture of our government. Again, that's the part that the media would never touch. They would never touch this part. Again, credit to the lever, credit to status quo. They're the ones who are giving us all the information. It's because of them that we know that deregulation, I hope you're sitting down for this, deregulation of this industry happened, the railroad industry, happened under Obama, Trump, and then Biden sat on his ass and did nothing about it when he was in there, nor did Mayor Pete. So the last three administrations are all guilty. Under the Obama administration, they said, oh, these chemicals, the exact ones that blew up here, they're not the top level of toxic. So we could have some slightly more lax regulations around them because it's not as bad as the worst chemicals. Well, how did that work out? If we had more safety regulations, we could have stopped this. Now, Obama also tried to have a regulation that upgraded the braking system away from the Civil War era technology brakes and towards the electronic brakes. They put that into place. Then Trump came in there and said, get rid of that. Get rid of that rule. Let them use the Civil War era brakes if they want to. We don't care if they're more dangerous. We don't care if there are bigger issues with them. And then, of course, Mayor Pete and Biden get in there, and then Pete's not trying to step on any corporate toes. He wants to be president one day. So maybe one day, the rail companies will cut him a check for $200,000 and help him become president. So he doesn't want to step on their toe. He doesn't want to be rude. He doesn't want to be mean to them. And because of the corruption and the legalized bribery, we are where we are now. And then instead of being able to rely on the EPA as some sort of neutral, objective source of information, they lie to you. They lie to you. They do a photo op drinking water. They lie. This is why people hate the establishment. This was a failure at every single level. At every single level. You can't blame people for not trusting anything they see or hear or read if this is how the authorities act in a situation like this. You can't do it. Skepticism is merited as a result of this. You need to totally reform the EPA to actually do environmental protections. You need to totally reform every single federal agency that's involved in the regulations and the cleanup and the messaging and the information. You need to have actual experts in there who are going to be honest, who are going to tell the truth, who are not going to lie. And of course, the elephant in the room, which we just touched on, is deregulation is a crisis. Neoliberalism is a crisis. This is the logical end result of that. This is that. So at the very least, you need to re-regulate the railroads. But honestly, would be better off just nationalizing them. Shouldn't be a for-profit venture. Look at what happens when vicious capitalists try to squeeze every single penny out of the system. Now you have this whole area which is going to be a barren wasteland. And look, hear me now, quote me later. My assumption is within 20 years, you're going to see all these clusters where cancer rates and other health issues shoot through the roof. It's not even necessarily like, a certain circle around where the train derailment happened. I think it's more along the lines of if the water supply gets poisoned, people are in real trouble, and whoever's downwind of that toxic chemical fire, they're really in trouble. So in theory, you could have somebody, 10 miles from the zone where the explosion happened, and they're okay because their water supply wasn't poisoned and they weren't downwind of it. But you could have somebody 75 miles away, but in the direction that was downwind of the chemical fire, and they could be screwed. But you know what? Again, at the end of the day, I'm only speculating. Why? Because we can't trust the information from the authorities, from the officials who have lied every step of the way. And don't even get me started on the governor, the Republicans, who helped further exacerbate this crisis. And by the way, they decided to make the chemical fire even bigger so they can clear the tracks, get it out of there, so that you can keep making profit and get the next trains going. The whole system's disgusting and broken. And then, of course, you have right-wing media. What are they? You know what their brilliant takeaway from this is? This is great. You guys are going to love this. This is a war on white people. Are any of them going to tell you the truth about deregulation? Are any of them going to tell you the truth about corruption? No. Are any of them going to give you these on-the-ground facts that the lever and status quo? No. So they're not truth tellers. They're liars. They have their narrative and they hump it until the end of time. Everybody is a liar in this instance, and that's the part that's driving me crazy. I can handle incompetence. I can handle, hey, I don't know. I can handle that. Everybody can handle that. That's honest. What I can't handle is the lies, and they're coming from every which direction. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.